Okay, we've made it. Episode 2 of what is now titled The Memory Core. We did it, guys.
Amaris was right.
Amaris was right. We did it. We got to episode 2. Holy crap. So yeah, there were a couple things we wanted to talk about today. Nothing too big. One of the things I wanted to mention first, though, were a couple corrections, and most of that was on my end because I ran my mouth way too much and flipped over some things. So at what point, I think instead of saying backwater, I might have said Blackwater, which is either that really cool cartoon show about the pirates or that really weird group of mercenaries in Iraq that are really fucking weird. The other thing is when I was talking about fighting games and making that comparison, I accidentally said 30 seconds instead of 30 frames. So to refresh, when you are blocked on a reversal uppercut, it is 30 frames of recovery on block rather than 30 seconds. There being 60 frames in a second, therefore it would be half a second recovery. So that's that out of the way. I'm sure there'll be more.
I can't believe you messed that up.
I know.
You are a terrible human being.
You're right.
Pretty sure Comstar's watching you now.
Oh, I know, right? It's a funny point. Originally, we decided to name ourselves the First Circuit. We thought, that's really clever. That's a really good one. I haven't seen anyone call themselves the First Circuit.
And then a quick Google search later.
Yep. Somebody else wanted to name the First Circuit. And apparently, he's actually a pretty prolific podcaster. He's had a lot of good people that he's interviewed, including Blaine Pardo. So we had to quickly backtrack and try and figure out what we wanted to do. We also are trying to figure out a good catchphrase to end the podcast. There is a really cool Canadian dude who is a machinist on YouTube, and he ends all of his episodes with the catchphrase, "Keep your dick in a vice." And there's something about it that's just so good. We were trying to figure out what to say. And we were like, oh, man, yeah, Amaris is right. No, that's not right. Fuck Harmony Gold. No, I can't do that one.
Keep your Mackie torso cannon in a vice.
Yeah, no. So I think the best one I came up with was, and just remember, folks, ride the bell curve. But that's just, I don't know, that's not quite right either.
I don't even remember what I came up with mine. This is why I should not drink before we do this stuff.
Yeah, we had a lot of bad ideas. By the way, we both had 2 very strong beers. So we're going to see how this turns out. But yeah, there were a couple things we wanted to discuss. And of course, I mean, there's always ideas brewing, and including discussing aesthetics and the influences of BattleTech that we've picked up or the things that we've noticed. And I've got
what we like and don't like about Destiny.
Yeah. And what we like and what we don't like about Destiny and our previous experiences with role-playing games is probably going to be on the table today. But we even got weird tangents like, how does Emerson Lincoln Palmer's Tarkus tank fit into BattleTech? And there is a story behind that. I don't even know if Dan knows that one.
No, I don't know that one.
Yeah, so we'll get to that at some point.
We'll call the segment Story Time.
Yeah, Story Time. But yeah. So for those of you who are part of the Kickstarter for the BattleTech Clan Invasion box set, or those of you who are just part of the boards or just wondering what's going on.
If you're not in on it, please get in on it because it is awesome.
Yeah. So we were dropped with the beta of MechWarrior Destiny, which is a rules light version of the BattleTech role-playing game.
I'd say like 4.5 it would be at this point.
It feels like a completely new edition, so almost like it'd be like a 5th edition.
Just branching out, yeah.
Yeah. It uses the queue system, which, from what I can tell, is a Catalyst invention. It was in Shadowrun Anarchy before this.
I thought they used it in something else.
Yeah,
I never played Shadowrun.
Yeah, and then before that...
someone did bring it up.
Yeah, so it was Shadowrun Anarchy, and then before that, it was their Cosmic Patrol, which are apparently have been fairly well received, although Shadowrun Anarchy is very different from the Shadowrun main game, and much like MechWarrior Destiny, MechWarrior Destiny is very different from A Time of War, and I think there are both pluses and minuses to that. And I think Dan is super interested in it.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, where do you think both of us stand on it?
Yeah.
I am actually really interested in it only because even when I got back into Dungeons and Dragons, I'm the weird guy. Like I kind of liked 4th edition a little bit. because of how it was built. And this kind of reminds me that I still think Destiny's better than that, but it gives me that same vibe.
Right. I'm leery on it, and the reason why I'm leery is not so much because it is rules light, but because how it is geared in telling its story. And my big role-playing experience is actually with Pathfinder. And Pathfinder itself is sort of Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 after, I think, Wizards of the Coast put out Dungeons & Dragons 3.0 on the Creative Commons license. And so the guys over at Paizo then use that as the core to make Pathfinder. And so that's my experience. But, well, before we get into what we like and what we don't like, I don't know, Dan, if you want to kind of go through it. We got the Destiny PDF pulled up.
Yeah.
And
So there might be some blank spaces a little bit because I'm kind of glancing through this to see where we can start. I think to start it out, this was an idea I brought up, but
it's the arrangement of how Catalyst likes to write it's rules books.
Yeah, well, the arrangement's bad, but you got to forgive them because I know it's a beta, so they are going to move it around.
Yeah.
Please, for the love of God, put an index in this. Don't Total Warfare this, please. Yeah. But
yeah, it's one of those things. It's been noted a couple times, and I think Dan and I both feel this way. Since the guys over at Catalyst started doing their like rules compendium, the idea that there's Total Warfare, tech manual, so on and so forth. Their presentation of the rule books is phenomenal. They look great. And they're very explanative, and they're just the fit and finish is great. It's like that perfect piece of furniture where all the corners are square and all the edges are eased with a gentle round over. Everything looks really nice. However, it can be a real bitch to try and find something you're looking for. And sometimes things aren't listed the way you think they are, and you're really trying to find what's where.
Well, since they've started moving away from PDF releases and going more in print, that's kind of gotten better.
Yeah.
Because you kind of have to get out of that search bar that you're used to.
Yeah. and so it's one of those things. And I don't mean to say that to shit on the editors or the guys.
Yeah, we're definitely not shitting on them because I've loved their products they've put out lately.
Yeah, we are definitely huge fans, and I think even though the Jihad, I think it was more how we feared it was going to turn out rather than how it actually turned out. I mean, everything they've done. Yeah. I mean, the books look really good, and so that's not where we're coming from. We're definitely behind the Catalyst team. It's just for whatever reason, something with the layout. There's this je ne sais quoi that is missing on how the books flow, and I don't pretend to know an easy answer behind it. It's just something about it's not right.
Okay, so let's see, where are we going to start? So at the beginning of the book, getting into the rules, like Destiny is obviously supposed, at least in my opinion, you probably know more about the rules than I do because I spent more time playing with construction. Mm-hmm. But the idea I get from it is it's supposed to play more like a live action novel or like one of those cheesy like 80s movies like Commando.
Yeah.
You watch, because you're not tracking ammo, anything like that. You're just, you're going in, you're fighting, you got your one-liners kind of deal. So what I thought would be a good idea in the beginning of the book, because Catalyst loves to put fiction in their books now, at least a lot more than like the older stuff did.
Yeah.
I can't really recall like a lot of the older books with it, but that's besides the point.
Well, they'll have like that opening fiction that I think's been around for...
It's usually like your tour to Inner Sphere or...
Yeah, at least since the field manuals, if not earlier, they've had that in what's a source book, but not a storyline-driven source book. It's got that opening fiction. It's a couple pages.
Yeah, but I feel like they could put that to better use with Destiny, because what they could do is they could take the fiction, which is called Dragon's Lair in the beginning. I don't want to get too much into it because I know it's, I don't know, like classified, I guess you could call it that. But what they should do is maybe in between, like before like a major event happens, like let's say there's like a shootout or something like that, they should break it up and put in the interaction between the game master and the players. They kind of lay out like what they're thinking of in the creative process of putting it together. which would be their way of introducing, like, yeah, our rules are kind of vague, but this is the way, like, we kind of interpret the game going.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's tough too because Dragon's Lair, without getting into spoilers, it's sort of like part 3 of the short stories that came with the beginners box set and the Game of Armored Combat box set. You know, this follows Durant Carlyle, who is the father of Grayson Carlyle. Like this, that's what they're going for. But yeah, I think one of the things that would be great is that it would be nice to see these stories fit in with like how to play the game and like what they do.
In the box sets, the fiction itself like sets the tone of what the game is like supposed to feel like outside of the number crunching and dice rolling, because it, you know, the fiction, it puts the image in your head and it shows you how like a battle mech actually fights, you know. And I feel like Destiny could accomplish that with their fiction, and kind of as a way to touch on, you know, the gameplay and the rules behind it. Is I know they have examples in the book, but there's not too many of it. And with a game this vague, I kind of feel like you need to expand on that.
Yeah.
You can't just, I don't know, that thread that's on the website right now. I forgot the guy who brought up the point, but basically you play a plot point and you could like, let's say you're in this room, you know, it's a trap, gas goes off, and you did some really poor planning as a character.
Well, and this goes back to part of how this system works too.
Yeah. And it's basically like, well, I'm just going to throw out a plot point and I pull a gas mask out of my ass.
Yeah. And we're gonna get to
we're gonna get more into it, but this is kind of like where I'm getting into with the fiction, where they could kind of say like, we don't want those situations to happen. We want you guys to actually have a non-min-max experience with this. Like, you know, you want to have the situation where it's like, I'm gonna make a semi-decent decision. I'm gonna pull a cloth out, pour some water on it, put it on my face, and see if I can at least get out of here with taking as small amounts of damage as I can to my body, which obviously won't do much depending on what it is, but it's definitely a lot better than I'm pulling a gas mask out of nowhere.
Yeah. So you know, the way that the PDF is laid out, I mean, it kind of gets into a couple of things. It gets into sort of the rules of how the game works, which is a good idea. I think rules first is really potent because it gives you an idea of what you want to achieve when you start doing character creation. Mm-hmm. Whereas a lot of other game systems do, you know, character creation first, and then the rules. And what's nice about Destiny is that it makes character creation very easy, versus what's going on with A Time of War. And so, for those of you who are not very familiar, A Time of War is very number crunchy, and I think
the results are good.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, one of the things what I would like to see is a new edition of Time of War that addresses the critiques of the current system, because the Time of War game system is very powerful. It lets you do a lot of things, and it lets you simulate a lot of things very clearly, and lets you kind of like come up with things and how you would combine skills to achieve something. But my main complaints with the Time of War is that,
well, we had a good experience.
Yeah, we had a good experience.
We really did.
The character creation is very laborious, in a way that I think is detrimental, especially compared to, say, how character creation is in Pathfinder.
It's enough to push people away.
Yeah, because in Pathfinder, you could do your first session with your group, and the GM, whose experience is helping you kind of come up with a character and making sure that everything's legal and you know, square. With A Time of War, it feels like, oh man, I mean, it just...
There's not much you can do with hand-holding in that book.
Yeah, there's like a whole day. And I think the other big thing that gets to me is also how experience is gained. You know, they make it sound like experience should be like gained, you know, 10 or 15 points at a time. But when it takes 200 experience points to level up a skill, oh man, well, what's the point? I mean, you'll spend, you know, 20 sessions trying to get anywhere, and that's not really how. And granted, you can do whatever you want, but it just sort of, the way it's scaled, it just doesn't feel good. And I think part of the problem too is that and someone else mentioned this when we were talking about the autocannons, is that you can always house rule something, which is true. You can always house rule something. If you don't like something, you can just do whatever you want and you're fine. But my big concern is that rules should be sort of a lingua franca.
Sorry about that.
You should be able to kind of go from group to group and not have to worry about what you house ruled and how things work. And it's nice knowing that rules can be universal. And addressing these problems is, I think, worth doing. But and to be fair, I don't know if they will now that Destiny's out. And I think there is a concern that the Catalyst group is not a large enough team to do two things at once.
Yeah, it's either going to use Destiny as their main RPG, or Destiny is basically going to be the alpha strike of their RPG.
And that's not it's not against Catalyst, because I get it. Like, it's small. This isn't the days of the 80s and 90s, 70s, 80s, and 90s when a gaming company could have 20 people on staff and you can pump out products. It's not that way anymore. You just can't do it. And so Catalyst uses a lot of freelance writers, which is just the reality of it's either how you do it, or you become Games Workshop, or you don't exist. And so the question is, is there going to be enough support to handle both systems? And I think that is a fair question. Is it going to actually work out that way?
Which they did say they're not going to drop a Time of War. They did say that's not their end goal. But, we're fans. We're going to be skeptical.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. You can only do so many things at once. And I think someone mentioned, concerns about support. And I get it. Like, there's support in all of these different books in a sense of there's story hook lines for Time of War. There may be characters for a Time of War, or certain things that are usable for a Time of War for different, famous NPCs. But one of the things that Time of War is missing, that also MechWarrior 3rd Edition was missing, is that there aren't any modules. And I get that in a sense, as a GM, you should be able to come up with your own storyline. But what makes, for example, like early Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder or even modern Dungeons and Dragons or a lot of other RPGs very fulfilling is that you can grab a book off the shelf that is an adventure module. And if you're a GM, it can help you through it, or it can at least give you an idea of how a story should be told, or how the game system works, or story ideas. And I think of the times I've played, a game, the Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, and you start with a module, and then it grows beyond that, and it becomes something else. But you start with those characters, you start in that module, and if you're a new game master or dungeon master, having a scaffold to help you out with the game is huge. It's hard if you're new at the system to be thrown into something. And it can be really off-putting if you don't have those resources. And maybe that's a silly complaint. Maybe it's not something that's very real, and maybe I just need to just suck it up. But I don't know, something about it, like, there just feels like they're just, a couple adventure modules and not like free RPG day scenarios.
In summary, if a Time of War was actually supported, it would probably be a much better system.
Yeah. And again, the support doesn't mean, in my mind, support doesn't mean throwing a bunch of things in the back of a source book. I think a support means making sure the game's in print, making sure that a Time of War companion is in print.
Well, scenario books.
And scenario books.
Yeah. Like, I mean, the box sets, you've always had scenario books.
Yeah. And I think somewhere I saw it mentioned that scenario books aren't a big seller for BattleTech, because, the BattleTech board game itself is, it's like 4v4, last man standing wins.
Yeah.
But when you've got actual characters you're making, and you've got something to achieve based on a module, it's different.
Which is where Destiny's probably, in all honesty, going to shine. But it is worth mentioning that in Destiny, you can convert from a Time of War to Destiny. And this is off the top of my head because I don't have the section in front of me, but I believe from like Alpha Strike or a game of Armored Combat through there too. So it is compatible with every system. And I think Destiny itself is probably way more compatible with the other games than like a Time of War could be.
Yeah.
Because we didn't get too deep into it.
No, we didn't get a chance to do too much.
We didn't get too far into it, but when we did play, we weren't using like a Time of War's combat. Like we just basically took our characters and played BattleTech.
Yeah. Well, we didn't. I mean, one of the things about a Time of War, and it's not a bad thing, is that when it comes to interpersonal combat, is between character and character, not between mech and mech. A Time of War tries to be very realistic, and that's kind of one of the things I like about it. In a sense, is that in Dungeons and Dragons, your fighter has 50 hit points, and you take 49 points of damage. Unless you're playing with some of the optional rules, you're basically still as effective at 1 point of health as you were at 50 points of health. You get hit by that.
BattleTech flips the bird at that.
Yeah. You get hit by that dragon, and you just okay, I'll just take a health potion, whatever. In BattleTech, you lose an eye.
You lose an eye, and that's that.
Yeah, and it's not coming back. So yeah, there's something about that that's actually pretty cool. There's actual consequence behind making those decisions, which I think is interesting, and that's why combat is so complicated in a Time of War, because it is so lethal. If you're going to engage in this, it's got to be as serious as possible. Where as Dungeons and Dragons is, you go into the cave or the dungeon, you fight goblins, you find treasure, you profit.
Yeah. Well, in BattleTech, your side skills like negotiation and language actually matter.
Right. It's a much different meta.
That lays out the strengths of pretty much where Destiny and a Time of War is going to stand. Because Destiny, it's vague about it, but the essence is still there when it comes to the skills.
Right. Well, and even in a Time of War, I mean, I think it is mentioned that one of the things they emphasize is that a Time of War, and now Destiny even more so, is that it is role-playing, ROLE, and not role-playing, ROLL. So the idea is, if you can avoid rolling dice for something, it's probably better. Can you as a person make a compelling argument for what you're doing and why you're doing it and how you're going to do it versus, well, I'm just going to roll some dice.
Yeah, you're dropping the crunchiness.
Yeah.
Let's see. What else can we touch on?
Well, I think
right now I got rules of engagement in that section, which is basically build your character.
Yeah. I think the big thing for me is the queue system, that's what I'm hesitant about. And narration turns.
How creative can you honestly be with queues, to tell you the truth? Because if you read some of the example queues in there, it's like they just turned on like Alien and they just copied like you know what I mean?
Well, it's funny because
when is that? I don't understand. I'm looking at it outside of the box. Like, when am I ever gonna be like, kill the meat, save the metal? In the middle of a freaking battle. Like, how is that gonna get me into the game?
There's
it's so lame.
Odd pause with the person you're in the bar with, and then you just come up with that. Yeah, I mean, I guess for me is...
I don't know, seduction roll. Am I going to shout that?
It's the NPC just ripping her clothes off.
Yeah, I just blew that out of the water. I don't know, I guess I like the queue system now.
I guess, is for me, the idea is that, if you're going to be role-playing, you're going to kind of come up with what your character is going to be like, and you're going to be rewarded by the GM for maintaining character, and in Dungeons and Dragons, it's chaotic, neutral, or lawful good or whatever. I remember one of the last games of Dungeons and Dragons I played. One of the guys, I think he was a halfling paladin whose deity was Shellen, who was a deity of lawful goodness, and he stuck to character so well, and he would have a phrase. He was also he was a halfling paladin, but also a surfer pothead. So if there's something you agree with, he'd be like, "That's so Shellen."
Come on.
Or if someone did something you didn't like, that's not very Shellen.
Oh man.
And that's one of those things. Like I don't know. Like, do you need a queue system? Do you need to take up a chunk of the record sheet with queues like that?
Well, shoot, I played a I think it was a Drow Rogue in 4th edition, and my own party basically left me to die because I was being a rogue, a Drow Rogue, and I was stealing from my own party.
Yeah, yeah. So
I didn't need no queues to do that. I knew what I was doing.
Well, I just wonder, like, is that, like, and that's the queue system, and is that, you know, a holdover from Shadowrun Anarchy and Cosmic Patrol, or is it something new? I think one of the things I've gathered is that the whole use of the GM seems to be, and the emphasis on the GM being sort of a judge or referee in Destiny is a bit different than it was in the previous systems, which is probably good, but
maybe we just can't wrap our brains around it yet.
Right, because it may not even be that different, and it may just be where I'm getting annoyed by things that are probably not actually a problem. Yeah, the queue system has me kind of nervous because it feels as though
it's definitely different.
Yeah. Like there's spots in those record sheets for characters that could probably be used by something else, or like general references for how you do things. You know, like in Pathfinder, they've got this sidebar that has a list of skills and whether or not you're trained in it, and like what your bonuses are to that skill. And it would be nice to see.
Well, a list of cues outside of one-liners would probably be helpful.
Yeah.
So you can at least guide people in the right direction, because that's the only thing I get from it, just like one-liners. Like, let's say like everybody's in a slump, they don't really know what to do. You're basically going to be like, "Time's up, let's do this."
Yeah.
Out of nowhere, and it's like, "What are you talking about? We're all in a restaurant."
Yeah. Well, because the game emphasizes pushing the storyline. So the way the queue system works is that rather than you're rolling for initiative, there's the GM, and then everyone moves in a clockwise fashion from the GM. So the person to the left goes first, and then it goes around the table. And it emphasizes fast decision making to try and keep the story moving, but it also seems very loose. Like it seems as though the GM kind of puts out the rough setting and controls the NPCs, but at the same time, it's up to the characters what they see in their environment to a sense, which is very weird to me because, you know, I'm used to it. You know, the world is crafted by the GM. You know, what's there is there. If a character wants to make say something like, I want to look around and see what doors there are, the GM can say whether or not there's a door there. But in the narration system, it seems that anyone can decide there's a door there, or anyone can decide, you know, who's in the restaurant or the bar. And
well, it does seem like I remember vaguely reading it in there that they do basically have single and complex actions still in there.
Still in there.
So if it is somebody's like turn, if they are moving in clockwise, I would think you would still have to at least do an action before you would move on to the next person.
Well, there's narration, and there's combat, and then at the same time they also have something called talk time, and so it's nothing's happening right now, and we're in this location, and we're gonna go around and just, you know, what we're doing. So you know, one character's like, I'm gonna go, you look on this bookshelf and see what's going on and see what I can find. And there's other person who say, I'm going to go keep an eye out on the door and make sure no one's coming in to disturb us. And then there's talk time. And so if there were like 4 of us in a group, rather than us each taking turns asking questions politely, you know, maybe it's a bit more free form, and it's up to the GM to decide, okay, it's talk time. And the game is designed to be as fast flowing as possible. But then there are examples that, you know, I find something, well, what do I find? And it almost seems as though it's up to someone to say, oh, on this bookshelf, I find an e-reader, and I turn it on, and, you know, assuming that the GM doesn't throw a plot point like it's password protected, and then of course someone could be like, oh, I notice
I'm gonna play a plot point. I remember that e-reader.
Yeah, I remember that e-reader. It's like, I'm looking at that portrait of Alexander Kretsky, and I know the password's Rosebud. You know, I just
in some cartoons.
I did.
Uh-oh.
You know, it's like, I just found an e-reader and I know the password, and so I discover, you know, the schematics on how to make a Devastator battle mech or something.
Plot point. Hold on. I'm gonna call Comstar real quick.
Yeah. So it's just it's one of those things. I'm just sort of on some of how the Q system.
I think
flows.
it's ultimately with how they have this built. It's going to depend on the maturity of the group. To tell you the truth, because if it was a group like with you and me and some of our friends, you know from experience, like we've even had Alpha Strike games drag on so much that we're like, look, man, we're just gonna take the loss so you don't have to completely scrap your campaign idea.
Yeah,
like we've done that on occasion.
Yeah, I sort of yeah, it's one of those things. I don't like how loose it is. Like I feel as though if we had more of a structured Pathfinder feel where there's a GM who's crafted the world, and like there's stuff you're gonna have to make up on the fly, but you're crafting the world and you're answering questions and you're sort of forming things along a narrative structure, but it's got a rules light approach. I like that, but Destiny seems more like here's a rough sketch and a rules light approach, and it's up to the players to craft things.
Yeah.
And I feel it's a bit too...
Our vague is a little bit different than their vague.
They're vague, yeah.
Like I do like it being vague, but they still need to kind of hold people's hands through this. They need to kind of throw in some ideas, which is why I would think breaking up breaking up the fiction in the beginning, and actually showing like a okay, this is the fiction. We're going to apply this to Destiny, show you how a game would sort of work.
Yeah.
That would be a better way to present the rules.
Yeah.
Than what they kind of have now. Because that's why you're wondering. I looked at it, you know, kind of like how it was built in like a novel. Like, okay, I could kind of see that. Like, oh, well, looks like Kai Allard Leal played a plot point and at the end of it, and he's actually a spy.
Yeah. Or you mean Justin?
Or Justin, my bad, Justin.
But yeah, the game just feels as though it'd be too easy to get off the rails. And it feels as though getting off the rails is the point of what they're trying to achieve. And that's not so much what I like. You know, I feel as though... this is sort of the thing, like, why I tangent. This is why I kind of really dislike Neon Genesis Evangelion and a lot of Japanese anime. Because to me, it's sort of like, okay, I get it, Shinji, you're depressed. I get it, you're having a hard time with things. Take a Prozac, take a Xanax, get in the fucking robot, see the fucking world, and get over it.
Cloud, get over your fucking demons.
Yeah. But it's just sort of like, but then it's like, in Destiny, it's like, oh, but I'm really depressed, and I'm going to sit and mope, and it's going to be that for like half the show. And yet somehow we're going to be the best Japanese animated television series of all time, and nobody can wait until it gets to Netflix. And I say that knowing like I really like a lot of character-driven storylines.
I feel like we could just sit here and talk about Final Fantasy VII.
It's the fucking best, man. I don't know. But I just like that. That's what Destiny seems like. Destiny seems like it's a Japanese anime kind of gone off the rails, where you're just sitting there watching characters screaming at each other and then moping around and not getting to the point. And that's one of the things, like as an RPG, you're not so much into character arcs. Like you've got your character, and that's kind of your character. And maybe he or she can change and grow, but like your character sort of helps judge how you'd behave in a situation and how you solve a problem. And Destiny seems to be more...
I see it more like Predator and Aliens.
Yeah. Well, really?
Yeah.
How so?
Well, it's your cheesy like action movie.
Well, yeah.
So
Well,
that's pretty much how I look at it.
It talks about like doing these impossible things.
Your cue is that sick sick handshake.
Yeah, but it just sort of seems as though it I don't know. It just sort of seems like it's so easy to get off the rails and so easy to just mire around in bullshit.
Oh, Dude, I want to make Duke Nukem in MechWarrior Destiny now.
Well, sure, man. I mean, it's like you got all the one-liners. I'm gonna make Doom Guy into MechWarrior Destiny. He's gonna have no cues.
No, your Q is all of the weapons that you carry.
Yeah. He's not gonna be saying anything. It's gonna be silence and just carry a shotgun. Whenever like nothing happens, you just hear the loading of a shotgun as another round slams home in the chamber.
Oh man. Well, there's all the gripe against the Q system right there.
Yeah. So I mean, and that's my problem. And maybe I'm wrong. And if one of you guys wants to kind of, in the comments, because
I actually think it's fine. I just think it needs to be expanded on.
Yeah. What I would like to see is the GM have more power to kind of get to the point of a story. Because I've seen RPG games get off the rails, and I see them get off the rails in systems that are more GM focused. And to see a game that's even less GM focused, yeah, it just feels like like the end of Avengers. Well, what do you do? Well, we didn't save the world, but we went to get shawarma. We decided to skip the end and didn't want to bother with it, so we got shawarma.
Please don't tell me you're gonna say Destiny's like Suicide Squad.
I can't even watch Suicide Squad.
Well, do yourself a favor and don't.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else can we get into? We already pretty much went over turns, queues.
Yeah.
Well, I think construction's nice.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't. It's one of those things, and this is part of the problem with. So I'm 35. Dan, you're what, 34, 35?
Yeah, 34.
Yeah. So we're part of that transition generation of the millennials, and when stuff's on PDF like this, it gets really hard to stay focused. Like, if it was hard copy in front of me, it'd be so much easier.
I can guarantee you, I've probably missed a couple things. I am much better with a print copy than a PDF.
Yeah.
It has to do with how, I don't know, maybe like the rays come off of like your computer monitor. I cannot hold attention to that as well as I can a book.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of it too is, and maybe it's a bias, because I ran through 2 very long articles on Rolling Stone about King Crimson online. And I did that no problem way late into the night because they were pretty long articles. But something about this, it's for whatever reason, it's not giving my attention. And
I'd still struggle with it. Yeah. It's still hard for me. Yeah, construction is actually pretty nice. I've messed with it, made a couple characters. It's kind of weird how strength isn't tied into anything though. It
just seems like its strength is melee attacks.
It's more like body.
Yeah. One of the things that I find cool about Destiny that is interesting, although I think it's kind of ironic considering how many times people complain about rolling dice in Battletech / Total Warfare. But the way Destiny tends to work is that there's something you want to do, and it's all about your dice roll and the modifiers you add on. And then the dice that the GM then rolls based on...
Or opponent,
yeah. How difficult that thing is. And that's pretty neat. It's a little bit simpler. I think it's different from Dungeons and Dragons, where it's okay. That's a you got your D20 and you gotta roll a 25 or higher with your modifiers based on how difficult that thing is to do.
It'd be interesting to see 2 hackers compete with each other if you get in that scenario.
Yeah. And so seeing opposing die rolls is interesting, and I think it has some interesting things for combat, both personal and with battle mechs.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
your gunnery is competing with your opponent's piloting.
Yeah.
So it makes more sense why you would see, like, let's say you have a guy who's like a standard gunner, but he's, let's say, like a 1 pilot, a 1 or 0. That guy's going to be dodging bullets like no tomorrow.
Yeah.
That was really interesting to see. That one kind of threw me off a bit.
Well, and that makes things like, especially, how good like an ace pilot is, like Natasha Kerensky, a 0-0,
yeah.
Or I think even like -1 gunnery and 0 piloting. Like I can't remember which book that it's in. I want to say it's More Tales of the Black Widow. Like, it's insane. How she could go up against a whole lance of battle mechs and not even be scratched, because using MechWarrior Destiny, she could just constantly like roll 2d6 against what the opponent's gunnery is, and just they would whiff all the time. One of the things that kind of bothers me though is we were talking about this, these square system where
embrace the hexagons, please.
Yeah, everything's sort of really abstract, and so there's not actually map sheets. It's sort of how you are in relation to your opponent, and distance is abstracted into sort of squares. Whether you're short, medium, long, or out of range,
which is both for personal and augmented combat.
And it's I don't know. I mean, I guess it's the abstraction's interesting, but I feel like if you've got multiple things going on the map sheet, like how does that actually work? And it's one of those things. Destiny seems to be doing too many things at once. It seems to be simplifying role playing. It seems to be trying to attract new players, and it seems to be wanting to be a bridge between an RPG setting and the more technical tabletop setting. But it can't do all these things at once because Destiny seems so far removed from what Total Warfare or even Alpha Strike is, that how do you get someone then into the standard tabletop game?
Because your abstract mech combat is different.
Yeah, and there's even like little things in the beta that bother me. Like you look at a battle mech record sheet, which is incredibly simplified from Total Warfare, but they've actually flipped the locations on the record sheet. So I don't know if you noticed that, Dan, but when you look at the traditional battle mech record sheet,
I would just mark it like a traditional BattleTech sheet without even noticing it.
Yeah,
to tell you the truth.
So in the traditional sheet, it's a mirror image. So the battle mech's right side is to your right,
like to your actual right.
And where in this one, it's actually as though the battle mech is facing you. So the battle mech's right is on your left, and that's not a big deal, except you're going against 35 years of how a record sheet's been made, which is sort of one of those little things like, why now? And maybe it's not a big deal. But it just seems like one of those things like I'd flip that back. Because if you want to get any bleed over, that's what you got to do.
Now, did you play with or did you look at the conversion at all?
I looked very, very briefly. I think, and I'm still not quite certain if everything on Mexico Combat is single locations, like per weapons group.
Yeah, it is. I asked, and it definitely is. So, I mean, just an example, like take your Battle Master, you would have your PPC as your primary weapon, and then you would have, let's say you put all your medium lasers in one group, which you would suffer to heat and everything for that. Which, I mean, it's...
Well, and they call it target interlock circuits, which makes sense. I mean, the way they describe it makes sense. But in Total Warfare...
everything hits a different spot.
Yeah. So maybe if you wanted to, and there are rules for grouping weapons, you could put all your medium lasers in one group, and you roll, and they either all hit or they all whiff. But each medium laser, in the case of the Battle Master, 4 of them, each at a different location.
That's something we would do.
Right, which is huge, because if you can just pop 4 medium lasers into one single target interlock group, and they all hit the same location, why take an autocannon 20 when you can take 4 medium lasers?
Which, even then, we would probably stick with weapon groups too, because you have to kind of have the groups to determine how much heat you actually generate too.
Yeah.
So it is a good idea to still put things in groups. But I like the idea, like you would roll just one time for all 4 of those medium lasers, and if they hit, you're rolling location for each of them.
Yeah.
I think that would probably be the best way to do it. Opinions out there might differ, because I guess people hate rolling dice, but that would, it seems really weird to me, especially because of how downscaled armor is. Yeah. I mean, if you look at there actually is a clan section in this book,
right?
And you look at the Nova, my God, I cringe.
Yeah.
You got to be kidding me.
Because I looked at some of the record sheets that came with Destiny, and it makes it seem as though, why would you take anything else other than a Nova? Because a Nova would just melt.
Why do you need an autocannon 20 at that point?
Yeah.
Why would you take something other than...
Yeah.
You would just take the swayback instead of like a regular hunchback.
Yeah.
There's no point.
And it's a beta. Things could change.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, maybe they won't. I mean,
I mean, as far as like the abstract mech combat, I don't really have much of an opinion about it because it's something I probably wouldn't use. Because I could see us using the Total Warfare conversion and just sticking with that.
Yeah.
Or we would do what some people on the forums have actually talked about doing is basically taking mech scale combat from Destiny and just adding in Alpha Strike movement and weapon ranges. Which I think that's a pretty decent idea.
I mean, I think one of the things too that I would consider is that, you know, if you're playing Destiny, you know, chances are you've made a battle mech pilot that's probably pretty good, and it would be interesting to see sort of a Total Warfare mech sheet, kind of with a little bit of Destiny's rules thrown in, like the competing paladin skill role.
Oh yeah, I believe that's in the conversion.
Yeah. So it kind of like, you know, for those of you who are grognards and have spent way too much time reading your original print edition TRO 3025, it's fallen apart.
We've all done it.
I love that there's this entry on the Awesome, and I can't remember the name of the pilot, but it's a female pilot in the notable MechWarrior section, and she's in an Awesome of all mechs, and she's renowned for being able to sidestep flights of missiles launched at her Awesome. And, you know, the Awesome's a slow mech, and then being renowned for being able to do that, like that's cool stuff. And being able to play that in Destiny is really cool. And it's clear that the writers have flipped to those books just as much as we have.
Yeah. You know? Shoot, Adam Steiner with that axe. Come on, man.
Yeah.
That piloting skill is going to come in handy.
Hell yeah.
So, I mean, I understand why they're doing the abstract combat, though. It does look interesting. It does spark a little bit of an interest in me. It might be something I'd be willing to give a shot, but I could see us more taking the Total Warfare route with it. Mm-hmm. Or even Alpha Strike and just using, like, their chart, like, just trying to find a more abstract way to deal with it.
Yeah. Just
on a hex map. I mean, obviously, I would much rather have it on a hex map anyways. It's easier to keep track of.
Yeah, where's
way easier.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can even still use how Destiny handles mech scale combat. Like, even with their conversion, like, you saw how they have movement. Like, you're like, let's take like a Fire Moth. It would be like 4.
Yeah.
Instead of, like, you would probably just use like the movement rating for Alpha Strike where it's like moving 10. But for purposes of like combat, you would calculate it as you would with Destiny. So you would, you know, subtract like the TMM or whatever from it. I don't know if you saw that.
I saw a little bit.
There's like a difference in TMM depending on how far you move.
Yeah.
That like lowers or like raises it. That might be something to do because obviously Destiny takes a lot in consideration that we haven't tried yet. You know, and if they're having gunnery compete with piloting.
Yeah.
Let's see. What else do we got here? I don't know. You know, even abstract, it does look a lot like Total Warfare. I mean, it obviously leaves out a lot, but looks like they took a lot in consideration. Like punches and kicks, all that's still in there. Charge, damage. Yeah, the only weird thing is like how weapon groups work. That's the only thing that really bothers me.
Yeah, because it's almost like if weapons are going to be grouped like that, they're going to do that much damage. I mean, what's even the point of using a reduced... You know, what's the point of even scaling those things like that? You know, why not just use a standard armor diagram? I mean, is it just because you can fit armor and internal structure on the same silhouette? You know, the same outline of the battle mech? I mean, is that the only reason why? Because it's just sort of one of those things like, you know, if a Nova is going to do that much damage per weapon group, I mean, you're just going to destroy a Locust in one hit, right?
Yeah. It's why I'm glad they put the clan section in here because, my God, I mean, clan tech will just show you how broken something can get.
That's oh, we haven't even gotten. Oh man,
I guess this is kind of a preview. We're going to get into something later.
Just
a lot of it's similar, heat effects and all of that, damage to buildings, blah blah blah. See, building your destiny. Did you read any of that?
Yeah, I haven't.
Yeah, I haven't gotten that far either. Who knows? That might answer a lot of our questions too.
It might. I mean, I see that there's a little bit that's going on. I think this is the GM section.
Yeah, they have examples in here
Yeah.
for well, I mean, obviously character creation.
I mean, they really emphasize the free form and like sort of the liquid flow of the system, especially with plot points. So the way plot points work is that you have so many plot points, and of course, by doing cool things, you can be rewarded fractions or whole plot points by the GM.
Mm-hmm.
And you can use a plot point to do things. You can go out of order for that turn. You can notice something or change situation. And then, of course, for every plot point a player character uses,
The GM gets it.
the GM gets it. But the GM is limited as well. The GM cannot use things with malice. You know, it can't just be like, oh, that character's really pissed me off, or that player's really pissed me off, so I'm going to do something to really screw him over. It's supposed to be used sort of indirectly to change the situation. And so maybe one of those things, like one of the examples is, for like a head hit in combat does full damage instead of half damage. Or...
Well, you have to use a plot point to hit the cockpit.
Yeah. So there are things you can do by using plot points that can mix things up. Or you notice something, or you have a piece of tech, or you're able to crack a code on something, and then the GM can find a way to try to change things around, like, oh, that piece of pavement is actually covered in oil or something like that, and then you have to slip on it, or like maybe you have to do like a saving throw to not slip on that pavement, and maybe you do slip. So that there are things that the plot point system does that is interesting. It basically allows a series of wild cards to be thrown, and it leaves it open to imagination. It leaves it open to excitement, and they kind of really emphasize that idea. And that plot point is different from Edge.
Edge is mostly like dice rolls or like adding to your roll result.
Yeah. So like you roll a bad die, you can use an edge point to re-roll it, and of course, obviously, that's a limited resource as well.
Yeah, I think you get it back per scenario.
Yeah,
which is like kind of normal for.
Yeah, and so I mean, plot points aren't even really a problem. I think they're actually pretty neat. It just, for me, it gets back to how does the game flow with this whole narrative talk time open play structure versus a more standard.
Yeah, they definitely need to lay out how they want plot points to actually be used.
Yeah, because I mean, BattleTech for a long time has been about the plot driven experience. Here's the problem, here is the invaded planet, here's how I go about this. And like I said, I've been a part of D&D campaigns where it's like, well, you know what, we're gonna ignore this invasion of our home country. We're gonna kind of go over here and do whatever else. And it just feels like Destiny would allow someone to be like, you know what, I don't really care that the Draconis Combine has invaded this planet. I'm gonna go pick up chicks.
Here we go. Yeah, see, I kind of like how the missions, you can just basically have it all on one page, though.
Yeah.
It is very easy to look at. And again, like, I don't know if it's just because of what we're used to. How would you honestly work with that?
Yeah, they make missions seem like an episode of a TV show. You got your mission, which is the whole episode, and then you've got your scenes. And so, like, take your traditional Power Rangers or your traditional Scrubs episode, or even like the original Star Wars trilogy. You got your introduction of the problem in scene 1. You've got the low point in season 2 or scene 2, and then you've got the resolution in scene 3. And so every Scrubs episode is the same thing. You've got the characters introduced. Dr. Cox is giving JD a bunch of crap. Then they meet their current patient. Scene 2 is after the first commercial break, and something happens. Someone's feelings are legitimately hurt. The patient gets sick. He's gonna die. And then scene 3 is either they save the patient or they spend their time dealing with and coming, emotionally recuperating from the death of the patient. And so that's what I think this is. Your mission is your episode, and your scenes are individual points before each commercial break. And within each of those scenes are the number of narrative turns to resolve that scene.
Our group would totally have it like a South Park episode.
Yeah.
Who's going to be Randy?
Man, bear, pig. Man, bear.
Oh my gosh.
Well, that's the problem. Are you going to be the group that makes fun of Al Gore because Man, bear, pig is fake and it's his joke, or is it going to be
an episode of House,
or is it going to be the second episode that came 10 seasons later where Man, bear, pig is real?
Oh my god. So, could it be like the Jihad?
Yeah. Have you seen?
Oh my god!
Have you seen that episode?
The Man Bear Pig real one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just make it sure. Just make it sure.
I don't want to give up soy sauce. Are you kidding me? I guess we could bargain with them.
Yeah.
Let's see. So yeah, we got mission briefings. Let's see. Warriors catalog. I like to see more traits.
Yeah.
Yeah, they basically leave it open. Like, you can actually make up your own traits.
Well, and they do mention it with the GM is that you can even modify your own weapons. And I think the example they give is the idea is like, okay, I want this pistol that does a knockdown after the person's been hit by it.
Yeah.
And they make it more like, well, it's okay. It's not gonna be an automatic knockdown. Like maybe it takes like a saving throw by the.
They got a silencer on my pistol.
Yeah. So yeah, again, when it comes down to it, I mean, Destiny's got potential, but there are things that I'm sort of concerned about, and I think it comes down to again, what support is there, and is there any help for a burgeoning GM to try and figure out how to best play the game, which is where Battletech's been sort of lacking with the time of war.
You poor GM.
Yeah.
Let's see. Life modules. Yeah, I'd like to see a little more on that too. I would like to see, like, if you choose like what faction you are, maybe some benefits and some consequences for choosing a faction. Otherwise, I think everything else is pretty good.
Yeah.
It's so vague, but it does accomplish what it needs to accomplish.
Yeah, I think there was some concern about is there enough differences between the different houses to make one worth taking one over the other, and I don't want to see things sort of like, oh, if you're a Draconis Combine mech warrior, you've got a better gunnery than it's like that's not very real to the universe, but maybe some sort of ways that you react or weaknesses that you get.
You get a +1 on a certain attribute and like a -1 on a different attribute for choosing.
Yeah. Like a Draconis Combine, I think, for example, you're sort of hamstrung by the broken form of Bushido that the DCMS utilizes, and then the Capellan Confederation has the Lorax Order, and so you're maybe sort of shoehorned in sort of how you view society because of that. If you're a mech warrior in the Capellan Confederation,
so it'd be like a negative modifier on charisma.
Yeah, like there are ways that can make things and this is where the Q system comes in. Like, does it have to necessarily affect a role? Should it affect the way you tend to interact with other NPCs? And not that you have to act that way, because you can become more than your background, both in real life and in the game. But there's got to be something in there that sort of affects how you do things. Because obviously, if you're from Clan Wolf, you're not so fussed about freeborn mech warriors. But if you're from the Steel Vipers, you're really fussed about freeborn mech warriors.
If you're Jade Falcon, you're just fussed about everything.
Yeah, you got the biggest fucking stick up your ass.
If you're Smoke Jaguar, you're just a crater.
Yeah.
Oh man. Oh, I just started the war, didn't I?
Yeah. Oh man, we have so many. We've been talking for about an hour now. We have so many things to talk about still.
Have we really been talking for an hour?
We haven't even. Have we? I better double check. We haven't even gotten into how much Alexander Kerensky sucks. Oh yeah, man, hour 13.
Wow.
Yeah. Or hour and 17 seconds. Yeah. Oh man, can you believe that? Oh, that'll really make people angry. You know how much. How much I think Alexander Kerensky sucked at his job.
Oh man.
Not that I don't like him as a character.
Oh yeah, he's a great character. Don't get me
But
wrong.
yeah. Oh man, the poor Terran hegemony.
That's where the Ameris right joke keeps coming from.
Yeah. But yeah, let's see. Do you think we got enough time for the Tarkus story?
I think we should touch on that. Maybe we'll save what was the other thing we want to talk about, like aesthetics?
Yeah.
We might have to save that for a different episode. I had no idea Destiny would take us to like a full hour.
Yeah, it did.
Such a vague game.
Yeah, it
demanded so much detail.
So here's my story on the Tarkus tank. We live in Joliet, and in Joliet there was a game store called Challenge Games. They used to have one in the Fox Valley Mall, and then that closed down, and then Challenge Games kind of moved to a couple different places. So this was during the 2000s when, MMORPGs were becoming really big, and people kind of stopped going to stores. And then in our area, Challenge Games was in one of the malls that was slowly dying, and they moved across the street after that land was bought out and turned into a Menards and Walmart.
Oh, that old Montgomery Ward.
Yeah, and then they moved from that place to a different place and renamed themselves Patriot Games. And then at that point, I mean, the guys who were running it were they just wanted to retire. But Dan, if you want, can you grab? Do you have a copy of TRO 3025?
Sure do.
So the guys who ran Challenge Games actually used to work for FASA, and they had opened up Challenge Games, and they were around at a time when Games Workshop games were exploding, and at one point they had a life-size Warhammer 40K Space Marine at the front of their store. So these guys were named L.R. Butch Leaper, and he would not tell me his first name, and he said if I ever found out his first name, he'd kill me. And the other guy was Forrest Brown. And I don't know if Butch is still alive. I know Forrest passed away a couple of years ago. He wasn't a very healthy dude. You could tell, like, he just was one of those guys where being white and being a senior citizen just hit him really, really hard. I think he has diabetes. I think he was later confined to a wheelchair. He might have had congestive heart failure. But what made me really sad is that I didn't find out that these were the guys that were in these early BattleTech books until like right before they decided to close down, and I think they retired to Kentucky. And I think Forrest had a daughter who was a dog groomer, and in the end they ended up being really, really cool guys. But they didn't talk about anything about BattleTech because this was in 2000s, and like they had a little bit of BattleTech on the shelf, but everything was GW. So when they had finally moved to their final location and they renamed themselves Patriot Games, I started talking to them, and they had their writing credits. I think one of them wrote for created the Banshee, and of course Forrest was in the military. I think he served in Vietnam, and so his experience, especially with military technology and military equipment, was sort of sometimes who gets the contract doesn't make the best piece of gear. It is what it is. Or maybe what they thought they were making didn't perform the way they thought it would. And TRO 3025 is just full of examples like that. And of course, part of the thing about BattleTech is finding out how to make those things work. I.e., the Gargoyle Prime actually kicks ass if you know what you're doing.
That's why there's like an Assassin fan club. There's some OS fan clubs.
Yeah. They got one member, and his name is Dan.
Yeah. No, Bishop Steiner does like the Assassin too. Don't even try that with me.
But yeah, so I got around to talking to Forrest and Butch, and they were around from the beginning, and they knew Jordan Wiseman, and they ended up being really cool guys to talk to, and they had lots of good tips on wargaming and all that stuff. And it was just sort of a shame because they were there for when a lot of in-store hobby shops and like, you know, tabletop gameplay in the hobby shop was sort of on the way out. And I was there at a time when, you know, you would go and there were 10 tables and 9 of them were Warhammer players. And then it was me and a friend, like the only 2 dudes playing Battletech on mismatched terrain because, you know, everything else was, you know, we were whatever the millimeter is that we were playing, like 6mm, and then everybody else was playing like 25 or 28 millimeter. And that's just the way it was. But anyway, so I ended up getting to talk to them, and they had a long history in the hobby industry. And this kind of gets into a lot of things with Battletech. So Battletech's very much a product of the 80s, but it's also kind of a product of the 70s, because you can see there's a lot of Dune references. And a lot of those writers listen to a lot of 1970s British progressive rock. And it's sort of kind of, you see it in the artwork. You know, there's a lot of, you know, heavy metal or metal hurlant inspiration. So a lot of Jean Mobius Giraud shows up in a lot of the artwork. You can kind of see that influence, and you can see a lot of Roger Dean and stuff too, from like who did the Yes covers. But Forrest Brown at one point, with I think maybe with Butch, they were trying to make a miniatures war game based off of the creatures in Emerson, Lake and Palmer's Tarkus album cover. So Tarkus, I think, was their second album, and it's awesome, and it has this great song on there called Bitch's Crystal, which has an even a more amazing cover performed by the group Kango, who featured the drummer from Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Carl Palmer, and then the singer of King Crimson, UK and Asia, John Wetton, who's an amazing singer. And that was like a live recording from the 2000s.
Bitches
so,
what?
Bitch's Crystal. Bitches is in plural, or bitch. Sorry, as a possession. So bitch comma s. And so on that Tarkus album cover is this tank, is armadillo with treads and sponsoon turrets on the side. And lo and behold, in this miniature display case in Patriot Games was a motherfucking Tarkus tank. And I was like, oh my God, how do I get that? Where is that from? And the guy was like, I got some left, but you don't have enough money in the world for it. And he was telling me the story, like what they wanted to do. And they were trying to make this miniatures game off of it. And they had a master and printings done of that Tarkus tank. And I wanted it so goddamn bad. And now Forrest is dead. And I got no idea if I will ever get it. And it was made out of lead pewter. And it was big and beefy and beautiful. And man, I wish I could have it. So yeah, those guys who did Battletech, I mean, they were into 1970s progressive rock, and they were into all sorts of different things. And it was kind of cool that I got to talk with them. And I just wish I could have talked to them more when they were still around / alive, because they were really nice dudes.
Man, I missed out.
Yeah, they were. I mean, and it's funny. I think part of the thing is that they were more open to talking about it, because they made it seem as though when they left FASA, it wasn't under the best of circumstances. Like maybe money was owed or something, or maybe they just got into a fight. But when Games Workshop started opening up their stores, and they had these really onerous contracts, like, okay, you can sell my Games Workshop merchandise, but you have to have 50% of your shelves devoted to GW gear. And that was fine when everyone was playing Warhammer nonstop. But when Warhammer hit a blip and there was other stuff that became more popular, it was hard to meet those demands. And I think in the end, them losing the GW sales probably hurt them more than they could recover from, because that was the industry. And at the time, for a while there, it wasn't an issue, because that was when like the Lord of the Rings tactical board game or tactical like tabletop game came out, and there was Warhammer, there was Warhammer 40K, there was Blood Bowl. And then they even had like a 3D Blood Bowl stadium that they made out of, styrene and blue board.
Weren't the WizKids click games kind of popular too?
Very briefly.
Yeah.
I have a feeling like the WizKids click stuff.
It's like Hero Clicks.
Yeah, it was good for like a couple years, and then it tanked. Which I think is one of those things coming to realize as we get older, like how short some things actually are. That's what makes Battletech special. It's lasted so long. But yeah, that's my Tarkus tank story and how it connects to BattleTech. So if you guys ever get the chance, you should totally check out Emerson, Lake and Palmer's Tarkus album, and definitely check out their song "Bitches Crystal" because it is awesome. So I think I rambled on long enough because I think I pushed us another 10 minutes. All right,
there we go. For a minute there, I was like, "Oh man, we're gonna have to start talking about aesthetics now. We're already getting into the '80s. We're already talking about
so yeah, that'll be next time.
Designs were made.
So yeah, well, guys, thank you for tuning in to episode 2. I hope we didn't bore you. I hope it was worth it.
We will be back.
Yeah, episode 3. Yeah, whatever.
Oh, it's gonna be aesthetic.
Maybe we'll skip episode 3 and go right to episode 4.
Yeah, Kerensky.
Well, cool. Well, thank you very much, guys, and take care. And I guess we'll I don't know. We'll figure out a catchphrase later.
I don't know. Kill the meat, save the metal.
I don't know. I'm not feeling it.
It's a little too much.
Yeah. Fuck Harmony Gold.
Everybody does that.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.